Astrologically, this was always we are familiar with. It is not something new. Some amount of ambiguity and conflict pertaining to one's own gender. He was such a great, handsome youngster. Suddenly is now conflicted. What would I do?
This video is an excerpt of The Forgotten Essence of Indian Culture and Temples. Airs live on iHeartRadio via Ruckus Avenue Radio. I grew up in the US, but my longing to know more about my roots took me back to India for over a decade, where I discovered there's much more than most people realize. Sri Ramachandra is a sadhak and Bhagavati Upasaka. He is a writer and a speaker on Indian philosophy, spiritual practices, and sacred tradition. So today there's a lot of discussion about topics like gender identity and fluidity, and many people believe that these ideas are like something very new. But is there any deeper understanding to all this?
One way to look at the current day explosion of the gender dynamics and gender fluidity discourses and all of this, which the modern, fair enough, we are not trying to dissect any of that. But you know what, astrologically, this was always we are familiar with. It is not something new. If especially the Buddha planet is placed in a particular way, it is affected in a particular way, that one would have some amount of ambiguity and conflict pertaining to one's own gender and association with it in their own physicality of the body. There is a high possibility for it. Why does this happen? Listen to the story of Buddha. He was such a great, handsome youngster, and he was once riding into the forest, and he found a lady whom he fell in love with, and he married. Then he figured out that that lady was actually a prince of another kingdom who was cursed to become a female. And so he became a female, and that's what Buddha finds as a consort, and Buddha marries. And later Buddha realizes the truth, suddenly is now conflicted. What would I do? How would I approach this? That is the story of the Mercury, Buddha. So here we are, and when we explain it, it just clicks immediately.
So how do we revive all these stories like this so it actually makes sense to people today?
It's just a matter of continued education. This structure of the reality, how we looked at it as the ancients, and what does it mean to have the Nagas and the Kula Devata and all of this. And then there are people who are very much tuned to it. Unfortunately, only thing that speaks and breaks open the blocks of the mind is fear, unfortunately. But we should not be instilling fear in them. The best way to educate is to speak the Puranic stories connected with it. Bring that recitals back. But this time when it comes back, explain it in the context of their human experience. Explain it in the context of what's happening in the family. This explanation remained dumbed down for many, many generations, probably few centuries. So what happened, what was taken for granted and never needed explanation, after a point in time when we entered into countering forces, where the explanation was needed, there was nobody to explain. And then that's what immediately led to the conversions. This is my way of looking at things. So when you are trying to bring back the ritual practices, which you should bring back the ritual practices nevertheless, and link it back to its Sthala Purana, what we would call, and the Puranic stories of those deities. But this time when you are telling the Puranic stories, make it relatable to the context of the life. The Sthala Puranas, the Puranas are such a genius stroke of the culture, that we have so many of them, that they teach the most subtle aspects in the most beautiful way. What does it mean to not do this ritual, not do this deity worship, not do this, how this will befall, what does it mean to have it? When you're telling a story, you're not doing any fear mongering and trying to play with the psychology and this is what would happen. Where we lost is the people with the knowledge of how actually this is what it meant. That's the explanatory part went away, and when we felt the countering forces, there was nobody to explain to our own communities and indigenous communities, hey, no, that's not how you look at it, you look at it this way. Suddenly the other countering forces look absolutely insipid. Why would you even go into something like that? Crazy. We are filled with rich and bountiness and festivals, and there's celebration after celebration. And we know how to mourn, really, in the best way possible, because that's how our culture has inbuilt into it. When we have such robust systems psychologically given, when we bring this back, we need to bring that explanatory strength back.